Hello and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. My name is Caroline Heward and I'm known as the Harley Street Stress Expert. Our show today is Talking Heads and I'm an expert presenter in today's topic, which is common intimacy issues in relationships, part of the Mind and Body Connection series. Let's begin. Apologies about that, just some technical issues with the presentation. Right, let's begin. I always like to begin my presentations with a quote, just to set the scene and let you settle into the kinds of things and the kinds of ways that we're going to look at this topic tonight. Soulmate intimacy. It's a quote by Kat Blanchett. If you age with somebody, you go through so many roles: your lovers, friends, enemies, colleagues, strangers, your brother and sister. That's what intimacy is when you're with your soulmate. So this can be very broad. We think about intimacy sometimes, especially in today's social media and today's focus on the physical intimacy. We could kind of forget the emotional side of the intimacy, the friendship side of the intimacy. And I want to really focus on that today. So this is about looking at every aspect of how we're in a relationship and what covers the intimacy issues. So here's another quote just to even the board a little bit by Dossie Easton. Intimacy is based on shared vulnerability. Nothing deepens intimacy like the experiences that we share when we feel flayed, with our skins off, scared and vulnerable. And our partner is there with us, willing to share in the scary stuff. Let me say that again, because this is really deep. This is very meaningful, and that's probably why some of us aren't in relationships. Intimacy is based on shared vulnerability. Nothing deepens intimacy like the experiences we share when we feel flayed, with our skins off, and vulnerable, scared. And our partner is there with us to share in the scary stuff. Dossie Easton. So I want to start with some really, really cool things that actually make intimacy much more enjoyable. Effective communication, I believe, is totally key to having a real deep intimate relationship with your partner. So what do I mean by effective communication? Usually when we're listening to people, unless we've done some very far out or training in communication, leadership skills, or personal self-development work, we're usually listening so that we can reply. Now, let me say that again. We're usually listening for what we can reply to. And when we're listening in that way, we're not actually listening, really listening to the person. We're listening to get in there and get our two penneth in, getting our fix it in there. You know, how can we respond so that we look good or the most effective in that specific communication exchange? But effective communication is actually about fully listening in every aspect, not only to the words, but looking at the eyes, seeing what the eyes tell you, looking at the physiology of the person. Are they looking away? Are they feeling vulnerable as they're describing something to you? Looking at the total body physiology, are they crossed? Are they open? Are they afraid? Are they vulnerable? Are they being honest? Are they being untruthful? This is what happens when we're in a relationship, that we're not always expressing our true effective communication, not really expressing all the time how we really feel. We're trying to second guess. And the commonest issue in an intimate relationship is that when the communication breaks down, then the intimacy physically breaks down. And it's because we hadn't been in our full truth. Let's explore this further. Accepting each other's faults. A key to good relationships is to accept each other's faults, to discuss and not argue, and always to do your best to control your feelings when upset. The key thing here is discuss, not argue. To be open to explore without argument. You're never going to agree to everything. Of course, we're all different and we all have different needs. And it's important to accept that there is going to be things in the other person you might not like. And vice versa, there might be things in you that they don't like, because we're all human and we're here having a human experience. If you can't accept the other person's faults, this is when things get sticky in the intimate relationship. This is when things will become difficult, because those small things that you're not accepting will become much bigger things. And then they build, and one thing builds onto another. And so, first of all, you have not putting the seat down, for instance, and then you have all sorts of things that follow after that that are totally unrelated, and yet they will start to wind you up. And so it's important to be accepting, compromise, be accepting of each other's faults, and find the place to discuss rather than blatantly arguing. When you express and keeping your feelings at a minimum in terms of keeping your control on the emotional feelings that you express. If you're shouting and screaming and being upset in terms of crying and screaming, nothing gets resolved in that space. And that is not a space to get resolution. You can be upset, but control how you're feeling. This is where you can move through the challenge of that argument or that upset into a place of compromise and harmony again. So let's look at some healthy interpersonal communication. When you're communicating, it's really important to be thoughtful in your responses. You might be nodding, you might be saying yes when you're communicating, but actually shaking your head with a no when you're communicating, because our body is expressing all of the time, and the physiology has never learnt to lie. We can absolutely verbally be economical with the truth. We have learnt to do that. We have learnt to compromise in what we say, what we feel the other person wants to hear or not hear. We can be really, really mindful of what we say, but the body has never learnt those skills. It cannot lie. The physiology will always show and demonstrate your truth. It will always be speaking your truth. So if you are saying yes verbally, but shaking your head, when you are looking at your partner and you are seeing no, that they are saying yes verbally, that is what they will take as your physiology response. It's a no. And so be very thoughtful and respectful when you are communicating, both verbally and physically. And if you're not expressing your truth, the body will always let you down. It will always express what's really there. So here's the thought and the invitation on that perspective is to be honest and be in your integrity when you express your thoughts to your partner. Focus on issue resolution. And what I mean by that is, rather than saying what's wrong, because it's really easy to say this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong, that doesn't work, this doesn't work. It's ever so easy to find fault. What about looking for resolution? Invite resolution. If you don't have the answers, invite. Can you help? I would be interested in your feedback. What do you think about that? Your take on that would be most helpful. Your support in this area would be really helpful. So invite feedback for resolution, because we don't all have the answers. And it might be that something is a complete collapsing catastrophe for you. And yet when you share it and ask the other person in the relationship what their thoughts are, you might be surprised that they don't see it that way, and they may give you a new perspective. So looking at issue resolution is a great way to communicate in your relationship, rather than focusing on everything that's wrong. Yes, of course, you have to say what's not working. If you don't have the answers, invite, ask, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Can you help in this area? Or if you have some thoughts on how you can resolve this issue that you are focused on, then invite that into the conversation, rather than only focusing on what's not working. Emotional processing. It's really, really important to allow space for emotions. We all respond emotionally in different ways. Sometimes when people have heard something that's been upsetting, they take space by being silent. They may be emotional privately. They may take space privately and get upset or emotional. Allow the space. It is really, really important to allow honest space that keeps both of you in your personal integrity. Because if you don't allow that space for your emotions to release, or processing what's happened, you will respond from a place of emotion. And then that is not good, because when you're responding from a place of emotion, the intelligence goes down, the facts go down, and that's when all hell breaks loose. Because when you're speaking from a place of emotion, you're not speaking from a place that's helpful and finding resolution easily. When people need their space and they go silent, allow them that space. Some people can't respond straight away. If you give them something that's difficult and that's challenging for you, it might make them go back, may make them go back in terms of what's happened to them in previous relationships. It might be something that's occurred in their childhood. They may just need that space to integrate what's come up, what the challenge is, and to process the feelings that come up. So allow the emotional space for them to be silent while they work it out, because it takes two people to tango, two people to dance, and both of you are operating from very different backgrounds and experiences. And so it's very important to allow each other the space to be in your own personal integration and processing. It is better to communicate honestly by allowing honest and open communication. It allows a much healthier, intimate relationship. If you don't like something, being really authentic in your honesty, rather than judging or blaming, being open in your honesty creates better communication for both concerned. So kindness in your communication is key. When you are giving communication, it is really, really important to be kind in that communication. What you may see as a grievance or an upset, the other person may just be not even seeing what you're expressing and what you're taking out of that communication. And so it's important to be open and honest in what you feel from that communication. See, we're all human and we're all made in different ways. We all have very personal, different childhoods and experiences. And so what we all do is we see things and we hear things and we experience things through our own filters. And when something comes up or that's communicated, you may have a filter that's different to the person that you're in a relationship with. And if you're operating from two different filters, what one person has said may be misunderstood or misread as far as the other person's concerned, and may not mean the same thing as the person meant it to be. I know it all sounds very complicated, but we are all human and we're having an experience, and it's important to allow for that kindful communication, that honest communication. Sometimes when you are really open and honest and you show your expression on your face, it's very easy then for your partner to be able to say, oh, that didn't go down well. So what's come up for you? Because we wear our expression on our faces. Some of us are really good and we hide how we're feeling. But when you actually show that there's an upset or you're not very happy about what's been said, that's when the other person can take charge and say, and change that so it becomes better, so that the communication is understood on both sides. I know this sounds very, very complex, and we are complex. We're not seeing and hearing everything because we're coming from our own filters of our own past experiences and our own past relationships. And so we will always see, hear, and experience things differently. And so all of these things help by being honest and authentic in your communication. Let's look at some unhealthy interpersonal communication. So I'm sure that we've all been in relationships where we avoid the topics. We actually avoid the ones that are going to cause an explosion or an upset. Now, avoiding the explosional topics will create more confrontation, which is known as passive aggressive. So when you're avoiding those hot topics, it will actually make them bigger and it will feel more uncomfortable. Whatever you suppress in terms of your communication, physically, emotionally, and behaviourally, gets expressed in your external world. And so if you are the person that's avoiding the topics, it will get expressed into your external environment by the other person, if they're very close to you, maybe picking them up and then communicating them back to you. And if you are suppressing the topics, it's forcing the other person to express them, either physically, verbally, or in other ways to change things. And so it's very key to have an appreciation of when you're resisting something, it actually becomes bigger. Whatever you resist persists and actually becomes a reality in your world. Difficulty in being honest. This is really, really interesting. Certainly, as I'm from England, I'm very British, The British find it very difficult to find a place of being honest sometimes when they know that it will create an upset in the person. So they look at all sorts of ways of sugarcoating it. That's what we call it. We sugarcoat things so it doesn't sound so bad. And because we don't want to offend or upset the other person, so we're always sugarcoating it so it sounds a lot more better and sugary. In that space, we're not being truthful, really. And when you are being in a space of untruthfulness, this is what can create an unhealthy communication in your relationship. Let me give you an example that it wasn't an intimate relationship, it was a friendship. We were going off for a dinner, a big black tie gala dinner, an awards ceremony. And one of the girls had 3 different incredible dresses, and we were all getting changed at her home for this big dinner. And she went to the first one, and I remember, me saying, "Oh, try the others on," because I didn't want to say that I didn't really like that one. And then she tried on the second one, and I said, "Let's see the third one. Do you like it or not?" And this is what happens when we're hedging our bets, sitting on the fence, that we're not being totally honest because we don't feel comfortable to be honest. And then I remember saying, "I really like the last one on you because it really flatters your figure. You look amazing." And I felt a place that I could be much more honest instead of saying something negative in the other 2 outfits. And so I was pleased that she had a choice of 3 because I was able to give very genuine, honest feedback on the one that I really liked. How many times in a relationship has the woman maybe turn around and say, "Does my bum look big in this? Do I look fat in this?" What she's really saying is, "Have I put on weight?" And how often does the man turn around and say, "No, your bum looks big in that," and makes a faux pas and says it incorrectly and then makes the upset even bigger. So these are very whimsical examples, and at the same time it addresses the point that sometimes we have a difficulty in being truly honest with how we feel and what we think about things. Not being listened to. In our communication, the woman has more words. It's just a fact. The feminine energy has more words, more expression. And so the feminine energy, what they want to do is just download. They just want to say it all. They're not looking for a solution. They're not looking for you to solve anything. They're not looking for any approach in terms of feedback. They just want to tell you about their day. They just want to download. And they know if you're not listening. They absolutely categorically know if you're not listening. And it starts to offend them, and it really upsets them if they don't feel listened to, because they waited for you to listen to their conversation. And I know it might be one-sided, but this is the feminine energy. Now, the masculine energy will generally listen, and this is being very general because we're both masculine and feminine. If you're very focused, if you're very logical, especially in your working conditions and in your occupation, when you're on a project, when you're in a business relationship, working with a colleague, this is the masculine energy that we use, being very focused and specific. And so if we're not feeling listened to, then it creates challenges in the feminine energy. But likewise in the masculine energy, when you are in your masculine energy, the masculine energy is looking for, how can I solve this problem? What's the problem? How much do I need to listen to find the problem? What does this person need solving? I know it sounds really strange and very weird, but this is what we do. And sometimes there is an impatience on the masculine energy to listen to all the story. They don't want to know. They just want you to get to the point. Just get to the point. Tell me what you need. What's the problem, and tell me what you need. Have you ever had that expression in a relationship? This is very often a problem with masculine and feminine energy coming together, that the feminine energy just wants to download and express everything. The masculine energy is looking for, what's wrong? How can I solve this? So can you see how there's going to be challenges in that intimate relationship if the feminine energy doesn't feel listened to, and the masculine energy is doing everything to solve the problems that you don't seem to have? It's kind of a sitcom, isn't it? This is what sitcoms are made of. They're made of this scenario, and when you can see it all, it's really funny. When you can see everything, both sides, this is what makes a sitcom very funny. This is what creates the laughter. But when you're in your relationships, it's not so funny, is it? It's really hard. It's hard work for both parties. Withholding opinions. If you have an opinion about something and you know it's contrary to the opinion or belief of your partner, simply not saying is an unhealthy form of communication. Simply withholding what you feel, your opinion, your thoughts, your perspective, is going to create unhealthy communication between you, which is going to affect your intimacy, because it will come out. If you're not saying something, it will come out in your physiology, in your gestures and your expressions. These are the things that we can't change. And these are the things that won't be withheld. These are the areas of communication that absolutely will show up every single time you withhold your opinion. Gaslighting and manipulation. And being lied to, because gaslighting, manipulation, it's all very topical in recent years. It also comes through if you're lying about something, if you're trying to get the upper hand by manipulating a situation in the relationship, it will create an impact and an effect within your intimacy. This all kind of sounds very garish, and at the same time, can you see yourself in these situations that come up, not only in the physical, emotional, intimate relationship with a partner, but actually in your working relationships as well? Because we become intimate. It's not just about physical sex. It's about an emotional intimacy that we have with people. And that emotional intimacy can be in a relationship that's a friendship, that's with a colleague, that's with a business relationship. And so these aspects are wide and varied in terms of gaslighting, making the other person feel that they're wrong all the time, saying, I didn't say that. What do you mean by that? I didn't say that. You're just imagining that. All these types of phrases are gaslighting. This form of gaslighting is manipulative to get the upper hand, to gain energy from the other person. These are both very unhealthy forms of communication within an intimate relationship. And this is obviously something that does happen in some relationships, which can cause problems within your intimate relationships. Passing negative comments. Have you ever been in a situation where your partner has been chatting to friends of yours, of theirs, of both of you, and speaking negatively about you? Or have you ever had the experience where they're talking about you, but not to you? And it almost puts you on the back foot, and it can actually lead to very, very negative experiences within your own intimacy with your partner if they're talking negatively about you or talking about you, which makes you feel, and it is about your response. So when you feel after that you overheard that communication, You feel disrespected, you feel unhonoured, and you feel almost like a spare part. And this kind of thing happens a lot in relationships, especially when there's poor communication, and especially when there's been an argument or an upset that one or the other person hasn't come to terms with. I remember there's a very old cliche, never go to bed on an argument. And I find that that's a really interesting cliche to work on, because when you go to bed on an argument, on an upset, what happens is it really wrecks your next day, and it wrecks your sleep, and it also affects your mood and the way that you respond and behave to your partner and in your external world with colleagues, friends, and within your social. So I would invite you, if there is a discussion, if there is an argument or something that you're upset about, is to do your very best to sort out, to arrange a conversation around a time that is convenient for both of you, and at the same time doing your very best to not go to bed on that argument or disagreement. Unhealthy arguments. Have you ever been in a situation where somebody's arguing with you in your relationship and they just omit specific details that cause you to go red? You just don't say some things that you know for sure are true. Have you ever had that experience? It can be really, really enraging when a partner does that. And then you find, especially if you get into that space of the argument, going in saying, well, you did this and you said that, and that wasn't how it happened. And it becomes progressive in that space when one partner omits specific details. It moves into a passive aggressive. So it could wind you up so that you respond in that aggressive manner and justify your perspective and your point and your perspective on how things happened and what things were said. Or it could move you into a passive state where you literally shut down. Let me describe what I mean by shut down. Many people do this, and I'm certainly one of those people that do this behaviour because it's a protection. So the aggressive external outrage is one response in terms of an unhealthy argument. But when you go passive, you go quiet. You don't say anything. You take your space. And then it can affect you in your body. It can affect you in your digestive system. It can affect you in terms of the way that you respond by not speaking your truth, by feeling uncomfortable to express. So that passiveness, it builds up inside the body. And if there is an unexpressed anger, for instance, that affects you physically and over time can create very severe acid in the body, which can lead to aggressive physical pain, such as arthritis, such as digestive disorders, where you might get heartburn, for instance, where the acid comes up the esophagus, and feeling sick. We have the expressions feeling sick to the pit of my stomach, or irritable bowel syndrome. And literally the body responds. So if we become passive and shut down, it affects you very, very deeply, almost as much, just in a different way, if the person is aggressive and being communicative in how they feel. Sometimes if you express how you feel openly without the aggression, or being passive about shutting down how you feel, then the communication becomes easier and lighter. If we move into a place of criticising the other person, you said that, and you shouldn't have done this, and you shouldn't have done that, and just criticising their commentary, the way they behaved, what they did, what they didn't do, it doesn't bode for a healthy, emotional, intimate relationship. Because when you feel criticised, if you're being criticised consistently, time and time again, what will happen is this could cause you to shut down. Because you'll feel like you can do no right. It's all wrong in their eyes. And so when you feel in that space, if one person is feeling criticised all the time, what will happen is it could lead to suppression. And then that will lead to the other person criticising more to get a response. So criticising is not healthy in an argument. To look at the aspects that are not working, look at what went wrong without laying blame, is a much healthier way to work in an argument and in a relationship to gain the best possible intimacy. If you're being rude to your partner, one of the ways that you can be rude is rolling your eyes. I'm sure that you've seen people roll their eyes and go, oh gosh, here she goes again, or here he goes again, and rolling their eyes. This is just totally inappropriate response. And yet this is a passive-aggressive response. This is where we don't say anything, but our physiology, our gestures say it all. Oh, I can't be bothered to listen to this. And when the partner is experiencing this behaviour, it doesn't bode well for a healthy conclusion to the argument. If one partner turns around and says, I have no energy to look at this or to talk about this, I've got no time to talk, and they're just shutting it down, this will create an unhealthy emotional intimacy. Without the emotional intimacy, the physical intimacy doesn't work. It's just sex. And that doesn't bind you together when there is no emotional aspect to the relationship. And it's starting to unravel. Can you see that communication is absolutely critical to having an incredibly wonderful emotional relationship, which will lead to greater and more emotional, passionate physical sex. So without the emotional side, it's empty. When there are personal attacks, when one is blaming and shaming the other person, it will create a very unhealthy, emotional, intimate relationship within your relationship. If you're attacking the person, or if you're criticizing the person, and the person feels that they're being attacked, are you attacking them? Because you might not be attacking them in your communication, but the partner feels that you're attacking them. So is it a personal attack? What might be not an attack to you, it might be to the person receiving the communication. So it's important to be really clear about your communication. And many, many years ago, I have done a lot of training in management. And one of the expressions and behaviours that I learned was that if one of your staff doesn't do what you ask them to do, it's probably because you didn't express it in the way they understood. Let me say that again. If one of your members of staff has not done something in the way that you expected them to do it, it is probably because they didn't understand what you were asking them to do. So they did what they thought you'd ask them to do. And so I always take it upon myself, if the person has not done what I asked, there's something wrong with how I've communicated it. And so one of the things that I do is I check in, does that make sense? That's one of the things that I say. Does that make sense? Or does that resonate with you? And other ways that you can do it is by seeing what the person has done and saying, oh, do you know what? That wasn't what I was looking for. Maybe I didn't communicate that well. Let me explain what I really want. And it's them taking ownership without the attack on the other person. And then that keeps you in the control without causing the argument. Reading between the lines. Here's a lovely quote. The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't being said. The art of reading between the lines is a lifelong quest of the wise. And these are all the things that I've been looking at, reading in between the lines, looking at the physiology. Are they saying yes verbally when they're shaking their head no? Are they saying yes, which really means no? And this is what's reading between the lines. Sometimes we don't feel comfortable to say everything that we choose to express because we're feeling uncomfortable for whatever reason. We don't want to upset the person. We don't want to make any challenge within the relationship. And when these kinds of things happen, then it's important to be wise and learn the art of reading between the lines. Sometimes it's not always what's said. Sometimes it's what's left out, the unsaid things. Sometimes by looking out and listening out for what's not said is how we truly hear what the person is really communicating. If somebody says, I'm not so keen on doing this activity, it's probably because there's another activity that they're much keener in doing. They just haven't said. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. It's not what's said. Sometimes it's what is not said and what's communicated in non-verbal terms. And what you leave out is usually a clue to what they're really saying. Let's look at some more common intimacy issues that affect relationships. Do you go around people pleasing in your relationship? You're actually doing everything to please them and not being you. If this resonates with you, this happens with a lot of couples, that they're actually trying to please the other person by being everything that the other person wants them to be, by being a yes person and forgetting about you. Have you ever been in a relationship where they're just not there? They're there physically, in the body. They're just not there with you. They're with their phone. They're in a conversation with someone else in their head. They're in a conversation in their head about something that's about to happen or a previous activity that they've been involved in. They're just not with you. Or they're on their phone texting. We can be physically there in a relationship, but not there emotionally. And this can create very, very difficult intimacy issues in relationships. Emotional affairs. This is a very powerful one because when there's things that are going wrong in a relationship, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes we reach out to a friend, whether they're the same sex or opposite sex, we reach out to someone and we tell them things. We tell them everything that's not right in the relationship. Very, very private things. This is an emotional affair, whether it's in a relationship with the same sex or opposite sex. It could actually make that other person feel uncomfortable because you might end up in a relationship with that person too after your current relationship ends. But when you are divulging very emotional, very deep-rooted things that are not working, that is almost a betrayal, because really these things that you're sharing should be shared with the partner it's not working with. And then you're creating more of an emotional attachment to the person that you're sharing all the things that are not working in your current relationship than you are with your current relationship. So this will create a very deep divide in your personal intimacy, in your relationship. Do you escape from your relationship? Are you a workaholic? Do you work some crazy hours and then you have a small amount of time left to be in your relationship? Are you in one of those relationships, or are you the person that's the workaholic? I certainly recognised myself as a workaholic when I was in corporate. I very much did that escape route of being everything in everything that I did in terms of my work and not having very much time for the relationship. It makes things difficult because it's a very easy way to escape being in the relationship, especially when things are not working. This can cause intimacy challenges. Do you wear a mask? Or does your partner, do you know of somebody that wears a mask that is wearing an identity? So they might be wearing the identity of housewife. They might be wearing the identity of cleaner, cook. They might be wearing an identity of mother, father, lover, home fixer. What identity are you wearing? Perfectionist, lover, husband, daughter. What mask are you wearing? What about being your true, intimate self? Who are you? What do you like to do? What do you like to say? What do you like to share? Over Christmas, I had an extraordinary opportunity of chatting to somebody who was sharing with me that she had been suffering with cancer and she was in remission. And in that expression of the story that she shared, I started to see some things. And this was what I saw, that she was everything to everyone. She was the wife. She looked after her children's children while her children went to work and earned a good living. She looked after her husband. She looked after her mother. She looked after her best friend. And when she was sharing this story, I was listening very intently. And I remember saying to her, "What about you? What do you like to do? What do you like to spend your time doing?" She said, "Well, I'm far too busy looking after everybody else." I said, "Well, what about if other people weren't there? What makes you happy? Emotionally, physically?" And her response was, "I haven't done anything for myself for a long time. I've been too busy looking after everyone else." This is what wearing a mask looks like, that everyone else is more important than you are. Let me say that again. Everyone else is more important than what you are. This will come from feeling unimportant. Everyone else is important, their needs, their requirements. This particular lady, she had been suffering with cancer in the throat area. And I said, "Not expressing your truth, feeling uncomfortable to say how you really feel and think." And she said, "You got me. I don't." And this is what wearing a mask will do. It will move you into a place of being the yes person for everyone else and not a yes person to you. that will change your experience in life. That will affect your own personal intimacy and relationship with yourself, as well as the intimacy and relationship that you have with everyone else in your life. Because you're not being your true self, and that will have physical, emotional effects on you. And then you're not in that emotional relationship with your partner or yourself. When you're not engaging with family and friends, is quite a common expression of some relationships. When you isolate yourself from family and friends and you keep the relationship tied to just you being the couple. So you have no external engagement with family and friends, the wider circle. I often wonder why this is. Is it because you might feel difficult or ashamed of what they might say, or uncomfortable with those young family pictures? Is it that you just don't want to get into the childhood stuff because that's what families are? You know, oh, do you remember when 10 years ago? This is the kind of thing that comes up. And is it that you're running away from your past? I feel that having a healthy relationship with extended family and friends means that you get to know the whole person, you and them. And it is about being totally authentic in that relationship, feeling safe to be with others, feeling safe to be in that relationship with others, as well as being yourself together. Here's some more common intimacy issues that can affect your relationships. Being glued to your mobile phone, having a relationship with your mobile phone. I've had some experiences of being on a lunch date, and I say date in inverted commas, and the person was on their phone, taking calls, texting, reading emails, in between a lunch and 2 drinks. And at the end of an hour, I felt that they were really with their phone. In our current times, in our social media times, where immediacy of response is sometimes more critical than it used to be. It used to be much more relaxed. You know, you could have lunch, you could have a break. But now there seems to be much more of an impetus on the immediacy of response. And if we don't respond, I mean, somebody's actually communicated with me today saying he'd like to connect, and let's connect on Zoom. And because I didn't respond straight away, I got a question mark. And I was knee deep in preparing this presentation for this broadcast. And I did find it a little amusing because there was an immediacy, a requirement for me to communicate straight away. And when I caught the message, I just responded perfectly honestly, saying, apologies for the delay. I'm preparing for a presentation and a live TV broadcast. Now, what was really interesting is that I felt really good about literally being honest. And it might be that you being attached to the phone in your intimate relationship is because there's a big deal going on, which is time sensitive. And so you have to be there. And I really get that. And that's completely okay. I'm not sure our fixation with our mobile phone is always that integral in terms of the timing that we respond. Jealousy. Jealousy happens so often in relationships, and it can really drive a wedge in your intimacy. Jealousy comes out of abandonment issues. So when the person has had abandonment issues in their childhood, in previous relationships, this creates jealousy within their current relationship. They're afraid, and so everything is up for questioning. If they were cheated on by a previous partner, and then their partner now is talking to someone, that can increase a challenge and an experience of jealousy because they're concerned about what happened in their previous relationship. So these are about abandonment issues. If somebody is jealous and being outrightly, overtly jealous and not wanting you to communicate or be with in friendships or have telephone conversations with people, it is because there will be some abandonment issues going on in their past, whether it's in their childhood, within their family, or whether it's in past relationships. Nobody likes a nagger. Really, honestly, nobody likes somebody that's nagging and complaining about everything and everyone. So when you are constantly nagging, sniping, complaining, this and that, it might seem minuscule, little things, but it does create a huge wedge in your intimacy. If you express a level of ungratefulness each time your partner does something which they've taken the trouble of doing for you or into the relationship, if there is no gratitude, so being ungrateful is actually not expressing any gratitude, this can create some intimacy challenges. I've talked about losing your identity by wearing a mask. Now, I want to bring it up in this way because this is slightly different. I've talked about wearing a mask in terms of being the wife, the husband, the friend, the cook, the shopper, the lover, the son, the daughter. And I've talked about those identities. This is a different type of identity loss. This is where when you're in your relationship, and have you ever noticed that you lose who you are in that relationship? You become swamped within the relationship and your identity disappears. It's the relationship identity. The way you can keep your identity is by doing things that you love, not always with your partner, but doing some things on your own. It keeps things healthy. It keeps things spiced. It keeps the conversation going. Yes, it's wonderful and it's important to share things that you both love. And I do invite you to do things on your own, and then you can share that too. So doing everything and being everything in all aspects with your partner can lose your personal identity. And if there's ever a breakup in that intimate relationship, you have to work out what you like and what you love again and start to find your friends again. And this can happen a lot in relationships. Text fighting. Oh, with the onslaught of social media, we do love our texting. Have you ever been in an argument with someone and they sent a text to you and then you've responded back? You might be in a different country, town, city. You might be in a different location. You might be in work and the other person's in their work. But texting, it's very flat and it's very monologue. There's no tone behind a text. Something that's factual can sound quite harsh in a text. The invitation I have for you here is to refrain from text fighting, to find a time to speak face to face, because things can escalate and damage your intimacy in your relationship by text fighting. Communication must be hot. Dan Oswald says, communication must be hot, H-O-T. H, honest, O, open, and T, two-way. I love this quote because I just think it's a lovely way to find some conclusion. It must be honest, open, and two-way. Thank you, Dan Oswald. It's been my pleasure to deliver this presentation on intimacy issues, how we can lose our emotional intimacy. Thank you for your attention and your interest. Please subscribe to USA Global TV and Radio. You can find all of our Talking Heads episodes under the playlist entitled Talking Heads. You'll find an avalanche of episodes under my name 2022. And now there is a new playlist 2023 under my name. Please do reach out if I may be of service to you in any way. I've touched some very, very hot topics in this presentation. Things that will have really touched you, will remind you of past relationships. I've touched on aspects that may have come up for you in past relationships and may be coming up for you now. I am here and I am in service to you. Please do reach out on nomore@live.co.uk and let me know what the problem is. I offer a free 30-minute Zoom, Skype or call Stress Buster consultation. Or call me if you're international, +44. If you're local, 07523 120 189. We're all human and we're having an experience. These things come up in our everyday. I want to be helpful to you and help uncover some of the things that you might be experiencing that are difficult to talk about. Please do check out all my previous episodes. I might not be looking at the very glamorous side of things, but I definitely can help you with your intimacy challenges and when things go wrong. Thank you. Wishing you a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you next week.